I was 14 years old when I first understood how quietly cruelty could operate. There was no shouting, no obvious insults, no dramatic confrontations in front of the class. There was only a steady, controlled erosion of confidence, of motivation, of the belief that effort mattered at all. And the person responsible never raised her voice once. It was ninth grade, honors English. Before that year, school had always felt manageable. Not easy, but fair. I wasn't the kind of student teachers bragged about, but I wasn't a problem either. I procrastinated. I sometimes relied on natural ability instead of discipline. I cut corners when I thought I could get away with it, but I was curious. I understood material quickly. And most teachers, even when frustrated with me, still treated me like someone worth teaching. She didn't. From the beginning, there was something unmistakably different in the way she looked at me. It wasn't irritation or disappointment. It was indifference mixed with judgment, like she had already reached a conclusion and no longer felt the need to investigate further. I could feel it when she called on me, when she handed back papers, when she spoke to me after class. There was no curiosity about who I was or how I thought, only assumptions. At first, I couldn't understand what I had done to earn that. Then I learned what she thought of athletes. She didn't whisper it in private conversations. She said it openly in class discussions framed as philosophy rather than prejudice. She believed athletes were distracted, unserious, and intellectually lazy, that sports were indulgences masquerading as character building activities, that anyone who invested time and energy into games must be doing so at the expense of their education. I played three sports: football, basketball, and track. That alone placed me firmly in a category she had already decided was inferior. I missed class sometimes, that much was true. There were away games, practices, tournaments, but I also missed class for academic competitions, math events, science contests, quiz bowl tournaments, things that required preparation, discipline, and performance under pressure, things schools proudly advertised, but she didn't see nuance. In her mind, sports overshadowed everything else. Academic achievements didn't balance it out, they didn't redeem me, they were simply inconvenient facts that didn't fit her narrative. She never openly scolded me for being an athlete. She didn't need to. Instead, she used systems deadlines, grading policies, workload as tools. After long away games, the homework load mysteriously doubled. Always the day after, always without exception. She knew exactly what time we returned. She knew we'd be exhausted. She knew we'd have other classes demanding work. And she knew she didn't check homework every day. Some days she didn't collect it at all, other days she barely glanced at it, but after away games she checked every assignment carefully. If anything was missing or incomplete, there was no understanding, no acknowledgement of circumstances, no allowance for being human. It felt calculated because it was. Over time, it became clear that effort wasn't the point. Endurance was. Compliance, submission to a standard that seemed to exist primarily to punish deviation. Then there were the essays. Writing had always been something I felt comfortable with, not perfect at it, but capable. I liked shaping arguments, choosing words carefully, trying to say something precise. When I turned in papers, I did so believing I'd done solid work. And then they came back. 80 on a good day. No markings, no feedback, no explanation. Just a number at the top of the page, written decisively as if no further thought was required. Around me, classmates unfolded papers, bleeding with red ink, marginal notes, corrections, arrows pointing to reorganized paragraphs. Comments explaining what worked and what didn't, and they had grades in the 90s. At first, I assumed the problem was me. Maybe my writing wasn't as good as I thought. Maybe I was blind to flaws others could see. But paper after paper came back the same way. Low grades, no feedback, no guidance. It was like being judged without being tried. Eventually, after receiving another grade that felt unjustified, I stayed after class. I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse her of anything. I simply asked what I could do to improve. She didn't look at my paper. She didn't ask questions. She didn't hesitate. She said I was only working at about 70% of my ultimate capability while other students were working at 90% of theirs. The implication was clear. My effort was being measured against a hypothetical version of myself, one she imagined, defined, and then used as a weapon. I asked her if that meant my paper could be better than someone else's, but still be graded significantly lower. She smiled and said yes. There was no embarrassment in her answer, no recognition of how arbitrary or cruel that sounded. She said it as if she were explaining a law of nature. What made it worse was what followed in the months after. Despite consistently low grades, she recommended me for an advanced writing class a year early. an opportunity reserved for students she believed had exceptional potential. It was a contradiction that haunted me. She acknowledged my ability. She simply refused to reward it. By that point, my motivation had begun to rot. Why revise carefully when nothing changed? Why push harder when the ceiling was fixed? The effort stopped feeling like a path forward and started feeling like self-inflicted punishment. Near the end of the year, she announced an extra credit opportunity. It was framed as generosity, as a chance for redemption. We could attend a local college's production of Antigone, write a 2,500-word analysis connecting the performance to class discussions, and turn in the ticket stub and playbill. It was worth enough points to matter, but the logistics were impossible. The play only ran Friday through Sunday. The paper was due Monday, and I was scheduled to miss school all day Monday for the largest academic competition of the year, one that required prior qualification and represented the school at a high level. I informed her well in advance multiple times. Each time she told me to turn the paper in Tuesday morning, I followed her instructions exactly. My mother rearranged her schedule to take me to the play. We rushed home so I could change, then drove downtown. She waited through the performance, then drove me home late that night. It cost her time and energy she didn't have to give. I worked on the paper all weekend, thoughtfully, carefully. I finished it Saturday afternoon. On Monday, I competed. I placed first in one category and second in another. I felt a brief sense of validation, like proof that I wasn't lazy, unfocused, or unserious. Tuesday morning, before basketball workouts, I went to her classroom and handed her the assignment. She didn't look at it. She said it was late. She said she didn't remember telling me I could turn it in Tuesday. She said it calmly, as if the previous week of conversations had never happened. When I explained again, she dismissed it. When I pointed out that another student had been allowed to turn theirs in, she said that student had managed it. She ignored the fact that the other student lived across the street from the school while I lived 20 minutes away and couldn't drive. She said I could have sent the paper with my mother. She ignored the fact that I had no reason to do so, given her instructions, and that my mother had her own classes and responsibilities. She said I could have written it Monday night. When I showed her the file, metadata proving it had been completed on Saturday, she glanced at it briefly and refused anyway. No partial credit, no compromise, just refusal. The message was unmistakable. The rules could change at any moment, and they would always change against me. By the time the final exam approached, something in me had hardened, not anger, something colder, resignation, detachment. She often bragged that no student had ever earned an A on her final exam. She treated it like a personal achievement, a testament to her toughness. On the last day of class, she asked us what our biggest wish was. I said I wished for an A on the final. She laughed and said she wished for $1 million and not to have to deal with me anymore. The room fell silent. It wasn't just humiliation, it was confirmation. Confirmation that this had never been about teaching, growth, or fairness. It was about control. The final exam had 100 questions and a 5-point bonus essay. 2 hours total. I finished the main section in 20 minutes. The rest of the time I wrote the bonus essay, asked what we had learned and what our favorite part of the class was. I told the truth. I wrote that I wasn't sure I had learned anything meaningful because I was never given guidance on how to improve, that my work was graded without explanation, that feedback, the core of education, had been withheld. I wrote that my favorite part of the class was knowing it was finally over, that I would never again sit in that room feeling judged before I spoke, measured against an invisible standard I could never meet. I didn't insult her, I didn't exaggerate, I didn't lie. I simply documented my experience. I never earned an A in that class. I never expected to. But when I walked out of that classroom for the last time, I felt something unexpected, not triumph, relief, grades fade, teachers become distant memories. But the experience of being dismissed, controlled, and quietly undermined stays with you. It teaches you something no curriculum ever could, that authority does not guarantee fairness, and that surviving injustice sometimes means refusing to let it define who you become.